Boomerang Blessings. Here is a short story about a woman who travels through the Aboriginal outback and learns through a simple boomerang that what she extends returns to her, and that giver and receiver are not truly separate. Leona arrived in the red heart of the outback at the end of a long, dry season. The earth stretched wide beneath an endless sky. Spinifex grasses shimmered in the heat, eucalyptus trees leaned in the wind, and the silence felt older than any story she had ever told herself. She had come carrying grief she could not explain. It was not one great tragedy, but 1,000 small burdens. Old resentments, private disappointments, disappointments in herself, and a constant feeling that life had asked more from her than it had given. She tried to hide it, but the heaviness showed in the way she walked and in the way she answered people with polite distance. One afternoon, she visited a small community art centre where carved wooden pieces, painted canvases and handmade tools were arranged with quiet care. Near the doorway, an old woman named Miriam sat beneath a shaded awning, smoothing the edge of a boomerang with a strip of worn sandpaper. Leona stopped to watch. Miriam looked up and smiled. "You ever thrown one?" Leona shook her head. "Most people think it is only about getting something to come back," Miriam said. "But first you have to understand how you throw it." She handed the boomerang to Leona. It was lighter than it looked. Leona turned it over in her hands. Its curved shape seemed simple, yet precise. Miriam led her to an open stretch of earth beyond the centre. "Throw it there," she said, pointing toward the sunlit plain. Leona tried. The boomerang dipped awkwardly, veered left, and dropped into the dust. Miriam laughed softly, not unkindly. "You threw your doubt with it." Leona tried again. This time she used too much force. The boomerang flew farther, then spun wildly and landed upside down. By the third attempt, she was frustrated. "I do not think it likes me," she muttered. Miriam took the boomerang back and held it loosely in her palm. "It is not about whether it likes you," she said. "It returns according to what you extend." With one smooth movement, Miriam sent it into the air. The boomerang cut through the light, curved in a great circling arc, and returned almost gently to where she stood. Leona stared. Miriam placed it back in her hands. "Your life works more like this than you think." Leona frowned. "You mean karma?" "I mean, if you throw bitterness, do not be surprised when bitterness circles back. If you throw blame, you live in blame. If you extend mercy, mercy finds its way home too." The words landed more deeply than Leona expected. For months she had believed the world was withholding from her. But now she began to wonder whether she had been extending the very thing she thought she was suffering from. She had offered suspicion and called it wisdom. She had offered distance and called it self-protection. She had offered criticism and called it honesty. And every one of those had seemed to return. They sat together in the shade while the heat softened toward evening. Miriam drew a circle in the dust with a stick. "What you extend returns not because the world is punishing or rewarding you, but because the giver and receiver are not separate." Leona looked at the circle. Miriam continued, "When you bless, you remember blessing. When you offer peace, you make room to know peace. When you extend mercy, you stop worshipping the story that you or anyone else is trapped in the past." Leona was quiet for a long time. She thought of the private story she had called Me, the one built from hurts, roles, failures, and old conclusions. She saw how tightly she had held it, as though defending the story would somehow protect her identity. But the story had only made her smaller. "What if I do not feel very merciful?" she asked. Miriam smiled. "Then start small, a gentle thought, a pause before judgment, a blessing where you used to send blame. You do not have to perfect the whole sky. Just change what you are willing to throw." The next morning, Leona returned to the open field with the boomerang. Before she threw it, she closed her eyes. She thought of someone she had quietly condemned. Then she whispered, "May you be free." She thought of herself. "May I be free." She threw the boomerang. It rose cleanly this time, caught the wind, and circled in a graceful arc before returning close enough for her to catch it against her chest. Something in her broke open. Not dramatically, not like thunder, more like a knot loosening. Tears came to her eyes. She understood then that love keeps giving without rest, because love is not a transaction between separate selves. It is a living circle, a movement of grace that remembers only itself. Nothing real was ever spent by giving. Nothing true was ever lost by blessing. The mercy she extended did not travel away from her into some distant world. It moved through her and revealed what had always been there. By the time Leona left the outback, the land had not changed, and neither had the outer facts of her life. But she would trust differently now. When judgment arose, she would notice it. When old stories demanded loyalty, she would pause. When given the chance, she would bless rather than harden. She had learned from a curved piece of wood spinning beneath a wide Australian sky that every blessing is a boomerang, and every act of mercy returns to the one who gives it. For giver and receiver are the same. Only love moves, only God remains, only now is real. May we sing, rest, and dance our way home together.